Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. It started as the kind of New Year's Eve you see in commercials. Warm lights glowing in every window, snow falling just enough to feel magical, but not enough to ruin the roads. Music drifting from open doors, laughter echoing down the street like the year itself was ending on a high note. I was not supposed to be alone that night. My name is Daniel Carter, and every year since college, my friends and I gathered at the same apartment to welcome the new year together. Same place, same cheap champagne, same dumb jokes about how this year would finally be different. But this year, something had changed. 3 days before New Year's Eve, I received an invitation. It arrived by regular mail, which already felt strange. No one I knew used paper invitations anymore. The envelope was thick and cream-colored, with my name typed neatly on the front, not handwritten. Typed Daniel Carter, apartment 4B, Riverside Avenue. There was no return address. Inside was a single card. No decorations, no colors, just black text on white cardstock. You are cordially invited to a midnight toast, December 31st, 1200 a.m. Your presence is expected. No location, no sender, no explanation. At first, I laughed. I assumed it was some kind of joke. Maybe one of my friends trying to be clever. Maybe a prank that would make sense later. But the date bothered me. December 31st, midnight. Midnight is not the start of December 31st. It is the end of it. The invitation was already wrong. I texted everyone in our group chat, asking who sent it. Every response was the same. Confusion, jokes. No one claimed responsibility. By New Year's Eve, the invitation had been pushed to the back of my mind. The apartment was full of noise and movement. Music thumped through the walls. Glasses clinked. Someone was always shouting from the kitchen or laughing too loud on the couch. Still, I kept checking the time. As the countdown approached, we gathered in the living room. 10 of us, friends I had known for years, people whose voices I could recognize in a crowded room. The television counted down the final seconds. 10, 9, 8, someone passed out champagne glasses. 7, 6, I hesitated for just a moment before taking one. 5, 4, the room vibrated with anticipation. 3, 2, I felt a sudden chill on my neck like someone had leaned close behind me. 1, cheers erupted. Fireworks exploded on the screen. Everyone raised their glasses. To new beginnings, someone shouted. To a better year, another voice added. I lifted my glass too, smiled, played along, but then I heard it, a voice that was not coming from any direction I could place. To him, the room went quiet. My friends were still smiling, still holding their glasses in the air, but no one else reacted to the words. To him, the voice was close, right next to my ear. I turned. There was no one there. The party resumed as if nothing had happened. Then everyone drank, all at once. The champagne in my glass was untouched. Every other glass in the room was suddenly empty. I checked my phone. 12:01 a.m. A new notification appeared. Unknown sender. Thank you for attending. Attached was a photo. It showed the living room, my friends, and me standing in the center of the room, but someone else was behind me. Tall, pale, holding a glass. I left. When I got home, The invitation was on my table. The date had changed. December 31st, next year, 1200 a.m. You did well this time. This was not a celebration. It was a rehearsal. I did not sleep after the party. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the photo again. My friends smiling, my arm raised, and that tall, pale shape standing behind me like it belonged there, like it had always been there. Morning light finally crept through my apartment window, thin and gray. The city outside sounded wrong for New Year's Day. No distant celebrations, no early traffic, just a hollow quiet that made every sound inside my apartment feel too loud. I tried to convince myself it was stress, too much noise, too much alcohol, a bad prank that went too far. But the invitation was still on my kitchen table. I had not brought it home with me. I was certain of that. The card lay perfectly centered, as if someone had taken the time to place it just right. The words, "You did well this time," seemed darker than the rest of the text, as if the ink had been pressed harder into the paper. I picked it up with shaking hands. The card was cold, not cool from the room, cold like it had been left outside in the snow. I checked my phone again. No new messages, no explanations from my friends. Our group chat was filled with blurry photos and jokes about hangovers. No one mentioned anything strange. No one remembered a pause in the toast. No one remembered me leaving early. I typed a message asking if anyone noticed something off at midnight. The replies came quickly. "You worry too much. You left right after the toast, remember? Best party we have had in years." One message stopped me cold. "Glad you finally joined us." It was from Mark, my best friend since college. Finally joined us. I called him immediately. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy. "Hey man, you alive? What did you mean by that message?" I asked. "Which one?" "The one where you said, 'Glad I finally joined you.'" There was a pause. "I mean, you stayed for the toast this year," he said. "Usually you sneak off before midnight." That was not true. I never missed the toast, but I said nothing. After the call, I noticed something else. My reflection in the dark TV screen looked wrong. Not distorted, not blurry, delayed. When I tilted my head, my reflection followed just a fraction of a second too late. I stepped closer. The reflection smiled. I did not. I stumbled back, heart pounding, knocking over a chair. The screen went black. My reflection disappeared. I laughed then, too loud, too fast. "Get a grip, Daniel," I told myself. I decided to leave the apartment. Fresh air, movement, proof that the world was still normal. The hallway outside my door smelled faintly of champagne. That made no sense. I followed the scent down the stairs, my footsteps echoing too sharply. Each floor felt colder than the last. In the lobby, I stopped. Someone had decorated. A small table stood near the entrance. 2 champagne flutes rested on top, an unopened bottle between them, and an invitation card. This one was not mine. The name printed on the front read Evelyn Moore. I recognized the name. She lived in the building across the street. She had moved out last year. After she disappeared, my hands went numb. I remembered the police cars, the flyers, The way people whispered her name in the elevator. No body was ever found. I backed away from the table. The front door opened. Evelyn Moore stepped inside. She looked exactly as she had in the missing posters. Same long dark coat, same careful smile. "Happy New Year, Daniel," she said. My throat closed. "You are not real," I whispered. She tilted her head. "Neither are you yet." She picked up one of the glasses and held it out to me. "Just a toast," she said. "You know how important it is." I ran out into the street, into the gray daylight. I did not look back. I spent the rest of the day walking. Hours passed without meaning. Every reflective surface showed the same thing. Me, and sometimes something standing just behind me. That night, there was a knock at my door. Slow, polite. I did not answer. Another knock, then a voice. "Daniel, it is almost time." I slid down against the wall, covering my ears. The voice continued, calm and patient. "You accepted the invitation. You raised the glass. You were seen." The door handle turned. I do not remember opening the door, but suddenly I was standing in my living room again. Decorated, balloons, streamers, champagne. My friends were there, frozen, smiling. The clock on the wall read 11:59 p.m., and I understood midnight was coming again. And this time, the toast was not for practice. I was standing in my own living room, but it did not feel like my apartment anymore. The decorations were wrong. The balloons were newer, brighter, as if they had just been inflated. Streamers hung perfectly straight, untouched by gravity. The champagne bottles were unopened, their foil smooth and pristine, like they had never been handled by human hands. My friends stood exactly where they had been the night before, frozen, smiling. Their eyes were open, glassy and unblinking, fixed on the clock above the television. No one breathed. No one shifted their weight. They looked less like people and more like carefully arranged mannequins. I tried to speak. My voice came out weak. "Guys, nothing." I walked closer to Mark, my best friend. I waved my hand in front of his face. No reaction. I touched his arm. Cold, not room temperature, not chilled, cold like the invitation card. The clock ticked. Each second sounded too loud, like a hammer striking inside my skull. 11:58 p.m. I stepped back, panic rising. This was not possible. I had already lived this moment. Midnight had already happened. A sound came from behind me, the soft scrape of glass against glass. I turned slowly. On the kitchen counter, 2 champagne flutes stood side by side. One was empty, the other was filled. Tiny bubbles rose endlessly, never reaching the surface. I did not pour it. I knew that with a certainty that made my stomach twist. A voice spoke from the space between the 2 glasses. "You are late." My knees nearly gave out. "Show yourself," I said. The air grew colder. A shape began to form. Not solid at first, just a distortion, like heat rising off asphalt. But backwards, darker, heavier. Then it stepped forward. Tall, too tall. Its outline was human, but the proportions were wrong. Arms slightly too long, head tilted at an angle no neck should allow. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, as if light passed through it without permission. It It held the empty glass. "You practiced well last night," it said. Its mouth moved, but the voice did not come from there. The sound came from everywhere at once. "This is not real," I whispered. It cocked its head. "It is real enough to finish." The clock clicked to 11:59 p.m. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might tear itself free. "What do you want?" The thing gestured toward the filled glass. "Completion." I shook my head. "I did what you wanted." I raised the glass. "I was there." It stepped closer. "You were seen. That is all rehearsal requires." The smell of champagne filled the room, sharp and sour. "Completion requires acceptance." I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. "What happens if I refuse?" The thing smiled. It had too many teeth. Then someone else spoke. "Not the thing, Mark." His frozen face twitched. "Just do it, Dan," he said softly. "We are tired of waiting." One by one, my friends began to move, not smoothly, jerking, like puppets pulled by invisible strings. Their smiles widened painfully. Their eyes never left the clock. "Please," I said. The thing watched me calmly. "Midnight is a door," it said. "A toast is a key." The clock began its final countdown on the television screen. 10, 9. The thing placed the filled glass into my hand. The glass burned with cold. 8, 7. I felt pressure behind my eyes. Images flooded my mind. Other rooms, other parties, other people standing where I stood now, holding glasses, making promises they did not understand. 6, 5, 4. I saw Evelyn Moore among them, her smile frozen forever. 3, 2. I screamed and threw the glass across the room. It shattered against the wall. The sound was deafening. The countdown stopped. Silence slammed into the room. The thing froze. For the first time, it looked confused. The clock flickered. The decorations drooped, losing their perfect symmetry. My friends collapsed to the floor, gasping, coughing, suddenly alive. I ran. I did not stop to check on them. I did not look back. I ran out of the apartment, down the stairs, into the street. The city was wrong. Every window glowed with the same warm light. Every television visible through the glass showed the same countdown screen. 11:59 p.m. Over and over, people stood inside their homes, frozen mid-celebration, glasses raised, and in every reflection, in every dark window, I saw it, watching, waiting. My phone vibrated. Unknown sender. You cannot break a ritual. This was never about one toast. This was about teaching you to open the door. I realized then the truth that made my blood run cold. The invitation was not meant to trap me. It was meant to train me, and I was still holding the key. I spent the rest of the night running, not away from something chasing me, but away from places where time refused to move. Every street corner showed the same thing. Apartment windows glowing with frozen celebrations, glasses raised, smiles locked in place. Televisions forever stuck at 11:59 p.m. The city had become a museum of unfinished moments. I ducked into an alley and pressed my back against the cold brick wall, fighting to breathe. My phone vibrated again in my hand. Unknown sender. Observation complete. The message disappeared before I could respond. I realized then that whatever this was, it did not need to follow me. It already knew where I was, where I would be. I made it back to my apartment just before dawn. The sky was pale, washed out, like the world itself was tired. Inside, everything looked normal again. No decorations, no champagne, no frozen friends. For a moment, I wondered if it had all been some kind of shared hallucination. Then I saw the mark. On my kitchen counter, carved into the wood, was a small symbol, a circle split down the middle by a vertical line. Simple, precise, deliberate. I touched it. The room tilted. I was no longer in my apartment. I stood in a different living room, smaller, older. The furniture was outdated, the television bulky and square. Streamers hung from the ceiling, yellowed with age. A digital clock on the wall read December 31st, 11:58 p.m. There were people here too, strangers, a family this time, a man, a woman, 2 children. They laughed and passed around plastic cups filled with cheap champagne. None of them could see me. I was standing among them like a ghost. The clock ticked forward, 11:59 p.m. The man raised his cup. To family, he said. To new beginnings, the woman smiled. The children copied him, confused but excited. Then I saw it, in the corner of the room, barely visible in the shadows, stood the tall, pale figure, watching, waiting. The family cheered as midnight hit. They drank. The lights flickered. The children froze first, then the woman. The man tried to speak, but his mouth kept moving without sound. The thing stepped forward and placed its hand on the man's shoulder. The scene shattered. I was back in my apartment, on the floor, gasping for air. I understood now. The city was not the first place this had happened. This ritual had been repeated for years, decades, maybe longer. Always at midnight, always with a toast, always with someone unseen. My phone buzzed again. Unknown sender. Understanding accelerates acceptance. I threw the phone across the room. No, I said out loud. You do not get to decide that. The laughter came from everywhere. You are already deciding it, replied the voice. Each time you look, each time you remember. I covered my ears, but the voice continued. Chosen because you noticed. I thought of all the other people I had seen. The frozen city, the trapped families. Chosen meant something worse than victim. Chosen meant participant. I spent the day researching old news articles, missing persons reports, forums buried deep in the internet where people shared stories no one believed. Every case followed the same pattern. Disappearance on New Year's Day. Last known activity was a party. Witnesses described the victim as distracted, uneasy, looking at the clock too often. One detail appeared again and again. Someone remembered a toast being made to someone who was not there. By nightfall, my head ached and my hands shook. I knew it would come back, and this time, it did not wait for midnight. The lights flickered. The air grew cold. The tall figure stepped out of the reflection in my window as easily as if it were a doorway. You are learning quickly, it said. I backed away. I will not help you. The thing tilted its head. Help implies choice. It gestured around my apartment. You have already crossed the threshold. I shook my head. There has to be a way to stop this. It smiled. That wrong smile full of too many teeth. There is Hope surged in my chest. Tell me. It stepped closer. Someone must refuse at the moment of completion and convince another to do the same. I laughed bitterly. You make it sound simple. It leaned in until its face was inches from mine. Simple is not the same as easy. It vanished. The clock on my wall flicked to life. 11:57 p.m. I stared at it, dread pooling in my stomach. I had less than 3 minutes, and somewhere in this city, another party was beginning. Another toast was about to be raised, and this time, I knew exactly what I was supposed to do, whether I survived it or not. I did not have a plan. All I had was a rule whispered by something that had no reason to help me, and every reason to lie. Someone must refuse at the moment of completion and convince another to do the same. Simple, not easy. I grabbed my coat and ran back into the streets. The city was already shifting. The closer it crept toward midnight again, the more unstable everything felt. Streetlights flickered between years. Some cars sat abandoned with their hazard lights blinking in perfect rhythm. Televisions in storefront windows all showed the same frozen countdown. 11:58 p.m. I checked my phone. Service was fading in and out, but one thing worked perfectly. Maps! A cluster of bright dots pulsed only 3 blocks away. A house party, music loud enough to bleed through walls. A place where a toast would definitely be made. I ran. The house was old brick with a wide front porch and paper decorations taped to the windows. Laughter spilled out every time the door opened. Inside, I could see people moving fast, still free, still human. For now, I knocked hard. No answer. I tried the door, unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with alcohol and sweat and excitement. A dozen strangers packed into the living room, shouting over music. Someone handed me a plastic cup without asking my name. I did not have time to explain everything. I climbed onto a chair and shouted, "Do not drink at midnight." The room went quiet, just long enough for a few confused laughs. "Nice costume," someone said. Another shouted, "You good man." I looked for the one person who seemed uneasy. Someone checking the clock too often. Someone standing slightly apart. I found her near the kitchen. Her name was Rachel. I did not know that yet, but I saw it in her eyes. The same look I had seen in my own reflection. Awareness. "You feel it too," I said, grabbing her arm. She pulled back. "What are you talking about?" "Midnight is dangerous," I said. "If someone makes a toast, do not drink." Her face went pale. "How did you know?" The music cut abruptly. The television turned itself on. 11:59 p.m. The room froze. Not all at once. One person at a time. A laugh stopping mid-breath. A hand locking in the air. Rachel screamed. I dragged her toward the door, but it would not open. The handle would not turn. The tall figure emerged from the hallway like it had been waiting politely for its turn. It nodded at me. "Intervention noted." "You said there was a way to stop this," I shouted. It raised a glass already filled. "Convince her." The room counted down. 10, Rachel sobbed, clinging to my arm. 9, tell me the truth, she begged. 8, I looked into her eyes. If you drink, you will never finish this night, I said. You will stay here forever. 7, the thing smiled. 6, I saw it behind her reflection in the microwave door. 5, I shook her shoulders. Do not listen to it. 4. Her hand trembled as the glass was forced into it. 3. I slapped it away. It shattered. The countdown stopped. The lights went out. When they came back on, the house was empty. No music, no people, no decorations. Just me and Rachel standing in a bare living room. We had done it. For a moment, the thing laughed softly. 2 refusals do not end a cycle, it said. They create witnesses. Rachel stared at me in horror. What are you? I did not answer. Outside sirens wailed. Somewhere another party had reached midnight. My phone buzzed. Unknown sender. Progress acknowledged. I realized the truth as the weight of it settled on my chest. Stopping one toast did not stop the ritual. It spread it. Now Rachel could see. Now she could never unsee. And somewhere out there, the door was still opening. One toast at a time. Rachel did not leave my side after that night. We sat on the curb outside the empty house until police cars arrived and found nothing to explain. No signs of a party, no fingerprints, no witnesses except us. By the time dawn came, the city had returned to normal, as if it had taken a deep breath and decided to forget. But we could not forget. Rachel kept rubbing her hands together like she was trying to warm them. It touched me, she whispered. Not the glass, the air, like something passed through me. I knew what she meant. Since the toast, the world felt thinner. Sounds echoed longer than they should. Reflections lagged again. Sometimes when I blinked, I saw rooms that were not there. The ritual had marked us. We went back to my apartment because there was nowhere else to go. On the way, every digital clock we passed showed a different time. Some were minutes ahead, some were hours behind. A few showed nothing at all. Inside my apartment, the carved symbol on the counter was gone. In its place was something worse. A second symbol, identical to the first. 2 circles split by vertical lines. 2 doors. It is spreading, Rachel said. I nodded. Witnesses do not stop a ritual. They multiply it. My phone buzzed again. Unknown sender. Multiple points of observation increase stability. I threw the phone into the sink and turned on the water, but the screen stayed lit under the stream. We spent the day planning. If the ritual needed a toast at midnight, then maybe it could be disrupted before midnight everywhere at once. We mapped the city, bars, event halls, apartment complexes, any place where people would gather and raise a glass. It was impossible. There were too many. By nightfall, the sky darkened unnaturally fast. Clouds rolled in without wind. The city lights flickered like nervous thoughts. Rachel grabbed my arm. Look! Across the street, in the reflection of a parked car, I saw them. Dozens, tall, pale figures, standing shoulder to shoulder behind us. But when I turned around, the street was empty. They were not following us. They were waiting. The phone buzzed again. Unknown sender. You misunderstand the scale. This city is not the target. It is the instrument. My chest tightened. What do you want then? I whispered. A host. The answer did not come from the phone. It came from behind me. The air split like a curtain being pulled aside, and the tall figure stepped through. This time it was clearer. sharper, more solid than before. Rachel screamed. It ignored her. You opened the door. It said to me, now you can hold it open. I backed away. I will not. It smiled. Refusal is temporary. Midnight is eternal. The room darkened, every reflective surface filled with moving shadows. I saw other cities now, other countries, time zones rolling like waves toward midnight. New Year never ended. It just moved. I understood the horror of it. The ritual did not belong to one place. It traveled one midnight to the next, one toast at a time. You want me to carry it, I said. To anchor it, the thing replied. To give it continuity. Rachel stepped between us. Take me instead. The thing finally looked at her. Already marked, already multiplied, but not central. It reached out toward me, my vision blurred. I saw myself standing at 1,000 parties across the world, raising glasses, opening doors, smiling for photos. I dropped to my knees. No more toasts, I said. No more glasses. The thing leaned down. Then we will use you without them. The clock on my wall flickered. 11:59 p.m. Rachel grabbed my hand. If it moves with midnight, she said, then we have to break time. I looked at her, desperate. How? She swallowed hard. Stop the clock. The idea was insane, but insanity was the only thing left. I lunged for the wall clock and tore it down as midnight struck. The second hand snapped off. Time screamed. Every light in the city went out, and somewhere far away, something howled in anger. For the first time, the thing did not smile. The darkness swallowed us whole. Darkness did not feel empty. It felt crowded. When the lights went out, the silence that followed was not quiet. It pressed in from every direction, thick and heavy, like the world had been wrapped in a damp blanket. I could not tell if my eyes were open or closed. I could not tell if I was standing or falling. Rachel was gone. I called her name, but my voice sounded distant, stretched thin, as if it had to travel miles to reach my own ears. Then the darkness shifted. Pinpricks of light appeared all around me, not stars. Windows, thousands of them. I was floating above a city that no longer followed rules. Streets twisted into spirals. Buildings leaned toward each other like they were whispering. In every window, people stood frozen mid-celebration, glasses raised, mouths open in laughter that would never finish. Every clock read a different time. Midnight existed everywhere and nowhere. You have damaged the flow, the voice said. It came from beneath me. The tall figure rose out of the dark like a thought made solid. Its shape flickered now, edges unstable, as if tearing the clock loose had hurt it. But not enough. You have delayed nothing, it continued. You have only made the moment visible. I felt myself being pulled downward, through the city, through walls, through reflections. I landed in a small apartment I did not recognize. A young man stood alone in the living room. Early 20s, nervous energy, phone in hand. A half-full glass of champagne sat on the table. A television glowed softly. 11:58 p.m. He looked exactly like I had 2 nights ago. This is what you are now, the thing said. A witness to every threshold. I tried to warn the man. I screamed. He could not hear me. The countdown began. 10. 10, 9. I saw the tall figure appear behind him in the reflection of the darkened window. 8, 7. I moved without thinking. I stepped into the reflection. Cold tore through me. 6, 5. Suddenly I was behind the man, not beside him. Behind him, he shivered. 4. He turned slightly. 3. I grabbed his arm. "Do not drink," I shouted. 2. He stared at me in terror. 1. Midnight hit. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. The room lurched. The tall figure screamed, not in pain, in rage. The apartment collapsed into darkness, and I was ripped away again. This time I did not float. I fell. I hit the ground hard. Concrete, rain, street noise. I was back in my city, but it was wrong. Cars moved slowly like they were underwater. People walked with delayed steps, repeating motions seconds after they started them. Rachel lay beside me. "Alive," she gasped for air, eyes wide. "You disappeared," she said. "For hours." My phone buzzed weakly. "Unknown sender. Boundary violation detected. You are becoming a conduit." I understood what I had done. By stepping into that reflection, I had crossed something permanent. I was no longer just opening doors. I was moving through them. The thing could not be everywhere at once, but I could. Around us, clocks began to stutter. Digital displays flickered between times. Some skipped midnight entirely. Others froze forever. Rachel grabbed my hand. "What does this mean?" I looked at the city and felt the weight of it settle onto my chest. "It means the ritual does not need the thing anymore," I said. "It needs me, somewhere far away." Another scream echoed through the city. Another toast had failed. Another door had slammed shut, and I knew the truth that terrified me more than anything else. I was winning, and that meant it would not let me stop. After that night, time stopped behaving like something I could trust. Rachel and I tested it in small ways at first. We watched traffic lights switch colors out of order. We counted seconds out loud and found gaps where no sound existed. We filmed clocks with our phones and played the footage back only to see frames missing entirely. Time was no longer continuous. It was wounded. The tall figure did not return right away. That frightened me more than its presence ever had. When a predator goes quiet, it is never because it has given up. It is because it is adapting. Rachel started seeing things before I did. Faces in mirrors that were not hers. Rooms behind doors that should have led to stairwells. She woke from sleep screaming about parties she had never attended and people who thanked her for saving them. "You are pulling others through," she said one morning. "When you move through midnight, you leave marks behind." I knew she was right. Every time I stopped a toast somewhere else, something changed here. A bar downtown closed permanently after its clocks froze at 11:59 p.m. An apartment complex was evacuated when residents reported seeing strangers standing in their reflections. The ritual was unraveling, but so was reality. My phone came back to life on its own. Unknown sender. Expansion confirmed. containment no longer viable. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, and suddenly I was not in my apartment. I stood inside a massive hall lined with doors, thousands of them, each door marked by a simple symbol, the same split circle carved into my counter. Each door was a midnight. Each one led somewhere different. The tall figure waited at the far end of the hall. It looked diminished now, thinner. Its edges flickered like bad reception. "You are destabilizing the structure," it said. "Good," I replied. It shook its head. "You misunderstand your function." The doors began to open on their own. I saw scenes spill out. New Year parties in different countries, different years. Some in black and white, some not yet happened. If midnight cannot be contained, it must be distributed, the thing said. You are becoming the distribution system. I felt pain then, real pain, like hooks sinking into my spine. I dropped to my knees. "Stop it! You cannot be removed," it said. "You are threaded through the event." Rachel appeared beside me, or a version of her. She was paler, flickering. "You are dragging me too," she said softly. I turned in horror. "I am sorry," she smiled sadly. "You never had a choice." The hall shook. Some doors slammed shut, others shattered. I saw the thing stagger. For the first time it looked afraid. "If you keep doing this," it said, "the ritual will collapse entirely." "Is that not what you want?" I asked. It stared at the broken doors. No, I understood then. The ritual did not exist to feed it. It existed to hold something back. Midnight was not a door to let something in. It was a lock, and I was breaking it. A sound echoed through the hall. Not a voice, a breath. Something vast stirred behind the remaining doors. Rachel grabbed my hand. "You have to stop interfering," she said, "or it comes through without rules." I looked at the shattered hall, at the flickering figure, at the endless doors. "If I stop," I said, "then people keep disappearing." "Yes," she replied, but slowly, predictably. "If you continue, you risk ending everything at once." The thing straightened. "Choice defines responsibility," it said. The hall began to collapse. I was pulled back into my apartment, gasping for air. Rachel collapsed beside me. We lay there listening to distant sirens and unfamiliar thunder. For the first time since New Year's Eve, I felt something worse than fear. Doubt. I was saving people, but I might be killing the world. Rachel did not speak for a long time after that. We sat on the floor of my apartment while the city outside groaned under unfamiliar thunder. Sirens rose and fell without pattern. Somewhere far away, glass shattered. Somewhere closer, a crowd screamed and then went silent. The world was reacting. I had wanted to save people. That had been my excuse. Now I was forced to accept something far worse. Saving some might doom everyone. Rachel finally looked at me. "If midnight is a lock," she said, "and you are breaking it, then someone has to replace it." Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "You mean me?" I said. She did not answer right away. "You are already threaded through the ritual," she said quietly. "You can move through it. You can feel it." I swallowed, And you want me to stay there forever. The word hung between us heavier than any scream. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Unknown sender. Correction required. Stability decreasing. The tall figure appeared in the reflection of the dark television screen. It did not step out this time. It simply watched. You see the truth now, it said. The ritual is not cruelty. It is containment. Then why take people? I demanded. It tilted its head. Every lock requires sacrifice. The room began to vibrate. The walls hummed like tuning forks. I felt a pull behind my eyes, stronger than ever. Midnight was approaching somewhere, many somewheres. I saw flashes of doors opening in my mind. Parties, countdowns, glasses rising. Rachel grabbed my arm. "If you are the lock," she said, "then you have to choose when it closes." I shook my head. "I cannot decide who disappears." The thing smiled faintly. "That decision has always belonged to the lock." A new vision overtook me. I stood in the hall of doors again, but now many were cracked open. Dark breath leaked through them. The air smelled old and wrong. Something massive shifted beyond the doors. Not a single entity. Many. If the ritual collapsed completely, they would all come through. I understood the final shape of the horror. The thing I had been fighting was a guard, and I was dismantling the prison. Rachel appeared beside me again, her outline flickering. "If you stop interfering, the doors stabilize," she said. The disappearances returned to their old pattern. A few every year. Lives traded slowly for the rest of the world. "If you continue," she added, "everything comes through at once." I felt tears burn my eyes. There has to be another way. The thing shook its head. "Choice without cost is a lie." The hall trembled violently. One door burst open. A hand emerged. Too many fingers, too many joints. Rachel screamed. I ran forward and slammed the door shut with my bare hands. Pain exploded up my arms. The door sealed. The hall went silent. The thing stared at me. "You are already doing it," it said. "You are choosing." I realized then what the sacrifice truly was. Not death, loneliness. The lock was not a place. It was a role. Someone had to stand between midnight and the world and decide how much darkness leaked through. Rachel met my eyes. "I will not let you do this alone," she said. I smiled sadly. "You already are." The vision shattered. I was back in my apartment. Rachel was crying. I felt different. Heavier, anchored. Outside, the thunder faded. Clocks across the city began to resync. The phone buzzed one last time. Unknown sender. Lock integrity restored. Custodian assigned. I dropped the phone. I knew what that meant. Midnight would keep coming. People would still disappear, but the world would survive, and I would never leave the threshold again. Becoming the lock did not feel dramatic at first. There was no flash of light, no collapse of buildings, no final scream from the thing behind the doors. The world simply settled, like dust after a long collapse. Clocks resumed their rhythm. Traffic flowed. People went back to their lives, unaware of how close everything had come to ending. Everyone except me. I stopped aging the way other people did. At first it was subtle. A mist gray hair, a scar that never quite healed. but never worsened either. Then years passed, and Rachel grew older while I remained exactly the same. She tried to pretend it did not matter. I tried harder. We stayed together longer than we should have, shared quiet mornings and restless nights. Every New Year's Eve, she watched me closely, terrified that midnight would take me somewhere she could not follow. She was right to be afraid. At midnight every year, I felt the pull. Not violent, not painful. I simply faded. Each New Year, I stood alone in the hall of doors, while the world celebrated without me. I felt every toast raised everywhere, every glass clinking together. Each moment tugged at me like fingers on a sleeve. I learned how to hold the doors closed. Not completely, just enough. A few disappeared each year, quietly. Predictably, the news never connected the dots. People called it coincidence, bad luck, tragedy. I called it balance. Rachel aged faster after she understood the truth, not physically, emotionally, knowing that the world survived because strangers vanished, weighed on her soul. Some nights she begged me to stop. Other nights she begged me never to leave. I could not give her either. The tall figure never returned. Sometimes I felt it watching from the far side of the doors, silent, relieved, or maybe resentful. I never learned which. Decades passed. Technology changed. Parties moved from living rooms to rooftops to virtual spaces, but midnight remained, and so did I. People learned to celebrate in new ways, but the toast never disappeared. Even when glasses were raised to screens instead of faces, the ritual found a way. It always does. One year, something changed. A toast was refused, not by me, by someone else. I felt it like a bruise opening. Someone somewhere had noticed the wrongness, had felt the pause, had chosen not to drink. The hall trembled. For the first time since I became the lock, a door cracked without my touch. I saw her, a young woman standing alone at a party, frozen in time, eyes wide with understanding. The same look I once had. The system was creating another me. Rachel was gone by then. She passed quietly in her sleep on a cold January morning. I did not attend the funeral. I stood at the threshold holding the doors while the world mourned. Loneliness was the true punishment. Centuries blurred. Then one night I felt it. Someone raised a glass, and no one drank. The hall shook violently. Doors slammed shut across time. Something screamed behind them. The ritual was changing. I realized then that my role was never meant to be eternal. It was meant to teach, to create awareness, to multiply refusal. I smiled for the first time in decades. The doors began to dissolve. Not open, disappear. The pressure lifted. Midnight loosened its grip. And for the first time since that invitation arrived, I felt myself stepping back, not into the world, but out of the threshold. Somewhere a party resumed. Somewhere a glass was lowered. And somewhere someone invisible was left without a toast. That was how it ended. Not with darkness, but with people learning to stop raising their glasses. When the doors began to disappear, the world did not celebrate. It hesitated. People sensed the change without understanding it. Parties felt quieter, countdowns shorter, glasses raised more slowly, as if an instinct older than language warned them to pause. Midnight still arrived. but it no longer demanded attention. For the first time in centuries, I slept through it. Not in the hall, not at the threshold. In a bed, I woke to morning light and the sound of traffic, and realized with a shock that time had passed without pulling me away. My hands trembled as I touched my face, half expecting it to feel unfamiliar. It was mine. I stepped outside. The city looked ordinary, but something fundamental had shifted. Reflections behaved. Clocks agreed with one another. The air felt heavier, more grounded, like gravity had finally decided where it belonged. Yet the silence beneath it all was unsettling. The ritual was not gone. It was dormant. I began to notice the new pattern within weeks. Missing persons reports stopped appearing on January 1st. Instead, disappearances spread thinly throughout the year. One in spring, one in summer. Never connected, never explained. The world had adapted without a single custodian. The burden dispersed. I aged again, slowly at first, then normally. My hair darkened in photographs from previous decades, proof that time had reclaimed me. I felt relief tangled with dread. Freedom always comes with consequences. At night, I dreamed of doors still standing somewhere beyond reach. Fewer now, cracked, unstable. Something pressed against them, patient and learning. The tall figure returned only once, not in reflection, in person. It stood across the street from me one evening as I watched the sun set. Smaller now, less defined. You did not end it, it said. No, I replied, but I changed it. It nodded. Change is more dangerous than endings. What happens now, I asked. It looked away. Now the world decides what it is willing to forget. It faded before I could ask more. Years passed. People stopped making toasts to the unseen. It became a joke, a superstition, something grandparents warned children about without remembering why. Never toast alone, they said. Never toast to nothing. I heard those words whispered in bars and kitchens and rooftops. Awareness had spread quietly. But awareness attracts attention. One winter night, I received another invitation. Same cream paper, same black text, but the message was different. We are invited. This time you will not stand alone. Midnight is coming. There was no date. No year. I understood. The ritual was evolving again, not feeding on ignorance, but on belief. I stood by my window, watching the city prepare for another new year. Fireworks waited, music cued, glasses polished. The invisible guest had not been banished. It had been promoted. This time, humanity was invited to participate willingly. I folded the invitation and placed it on the table. I did not know yet what I would do, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Midnight was still watching us, and it was learning how to ask politely. The invitation did not give a date, but my body reacted as if it had. I woke before dawn with the familiar pressure behind my eyes, the quiet tug that once dragged me into the hall of doors. It was weaker now, diluted, but unmistakable. Midnight was approaching again, not as a point in time, but as an agreement waiting to be accepted. I did not tell anyone about the invitation. I learned long ago that belief gives weight to things that should remain light. Instead, I watched. Bars filled, apartments glowed, rooftops echoed with laughter. People prepared for New Year's Eve with a careful excitement that bordered on reverence. They did not know why. They only knew it mattered. Social media amplified it. Countdowns streamed live. Virtual glasses clinked across continents. Influencers encouraged followers to raise a drink together no matter where they were. Never alone again, they promised. I felt the pressure intensify. This was different from before. The ritual was no longer hiding. It was networking. I walked the city as night fell, listening to fragments of conversation. Make a wish. Toast to something big. Toast to everyone watching. No one said to nothing anymore. They did not have to. Midnight no longer needed invisibility. At 11:57, the air changed. People slowed. Music dropped in pitch. Fireworks paused mid-launch, as if waiting for permission. I saw it then. Not a single tall figure. Many faint shapes standing in reflections, overlapping, blurred together. Not guards, not prisoners, guests. My phone buzzed. Unknown sender. Consensus reached. Participation exceeds threshold. I felt anger flare. You said belief was dangerous, I whispered. A reply came instantly. Belief is efficient. The world counted down. 10. Across the city, I felt millions of hands lift glasses. 9. Something pressed against the fabric of time. 8. Rachel's voice echoed in my memory. Never toast alone. 7. I pushed through a crowded square toward a rooftop party already frozen in anticipation. 6. I climbed onto a table. 5. I shouted, "Do not drink." 4. Some people laughed. Others hesitated. 3. I locked eyes with a man holding a glass near the edge. 2. He lowered it. 1. Midnight arrived. The silence that followed was immense, not empty, expectant. Across the city, some glasses lowered, others did not. The sky cracked, not with light, with absence. I felt doors opening without frames. Something vast leaned close. Then it stopped. The pressure eased slightly. I collapsed. Hours later, I woke on the rooftop alone. The city still stood, but it felt bruised. The next morning, news reported mass blackouts in pockets around the world. Entire celebrations interrupted by unexplained silence. Millions claimed they had felt watched. The ritual had failed, but not completely. My phone vibrated one last time that night. Unknown sender. Partial acceptance achieved. Iteration will continue. I looked at the city lights and understood the truth. Midnight would keep asking, not commanding, inviting, and every year, more people would choose to listen, not because they were afraid, but because being invited feels powerful. I folded the invitation and placed it beside the old one. 2 cards, 2 warnings, and only one question left unanswered. How many times can humanity say no before it learns to say yes? After the failed invitation night, the world did not return to normal. It normalized the wrong things. People talked about the blackout like it was a shared dream, a glitch, a beautiful moment of silence that made the celebration feel meaningful. Videos went viral of crowds lowering their glasses together, captions filled with words like unity and awareness. No one mentioned fear. Fear had become unfashionable. I watched this happen from the edges. I no longer tried to stop every toast. That lesson had already been learned. Intervention created resistance. Resistance created attention. Attention fed midnight. Instead, I listened. The invitation language evolved quickly. Toast with us. Be present. Be counted. The words appeared everywhere. On banners, on screens, on countdown apps downloaded by millions. Midnight was no longer invisible. It was branded, and people loved it. I felt the pull more often now, not just once a year, sometimes at random moments when enough people focused on the same second. Time would tighten like a muscle preparing to contract. Rachel had warned me about this. Consensus is stronger than belief, she once said. I saw what she meant. One night in early summer, I felt midnight gather, not at 12, at 7:32 p.m., a global live stream event. I stood in a crowded plaza watching a massive screen count down to nothing in particular. No year changing, no holiday ending, just a moment chosen by millions. The clock hit 0, cheers erupted, people raised glasses, and something opened. I saw it in the air, a thin vertical seam glowing faintly. The crowd felt it too. The cheering turned uncertain. Some people laughed nervously. Others froze. The seam widened. I pushed forward, screaming, "Lower your glasses." Some listened. Most did not. The seam closed suddenly. A shockwave rippled outward. When it passed, 3 people near the front were gone. Not pulled, edited. Their absence felt deliberate. The live stream cut abruptly. The next day, the narrative was already rewritten. 3 people had medical emergencies. Nothing supernatural, nothing to fear. I realized midnight no longer needed New Year. It needed agreement. Any synchronized moment would do. I returned home shaking. My phone lit up. Unknown sender. Efficiency improving. Iteration accelerating. I smashed the phone against the wall. Fragments of glass slid down like falling seconds. That night I dreamed of Rachel. She stood on the other side of a door that no longer existed. "You cannot stop this by yourself," she said. "I know," I replied. "Then teach them how," she said. I woke with a plan, not a solution. A counter ritual. If midnight fed on synchronized yes, then resistance had to be synchronized. I started small, anonymous posts. Do not toast. Do not raise a glass. Do not count together. The messages spread slowly at first. Mocked, ignored, then questioned. Some people remembered grandparents' warnings. Never toast alone. Never toast to nothing. Threads formed. Groups, movements. 2 opposing ideas began to compete. Participation versus refusal. Midnight responded quickly. Invitations became more personal. Targeted. People received messages with their names, their locations, promises of belonging. The war for midnight had begun, and this time it was not fought in shadows. It was fought in public, second by second, with humanity watching the clock. The war for midnight did not look like a war. There were no armies, no borders, No explosions to mark victories or defeats. It unfolded quietly in living rooms, bars, offices, and online feeds. It lived in comment sections and group chats. It thrived in hesitation. Humanity argued about a second. The movements grew names. Those who raised their glasses called themselves the Gathered. They spoke of unity, shared moments, and the beauty of synchrony. They believed midnight was a chance to belong to something larger than the self. Those who refused became the still. They warned others not to count together, not to toast in unison, not to give the moment a single shape. They believed midnight was a trap disguised as connection. I moved between them, unseen. Each side believed I was on theirs. The Gathered said refusal was selfish, fear-based, anti-human. The Still said participation was surrender, an offering made out of ignorance. Both were right, both were wrong. Midnight fed on certainty. The more confident a group became, the stronger the pull felt. Entire cities reported pressure headaches at the same moment. Animals grew restless. Power grids flickered under the strain of synchronized attention. The invitations escalated. People no longer received cards. They received memories, dreams of standing in perfect silence as clocks aligned, visions of warmth flooding their chest when they raised a glass with millions of others. They woke craving that feeling. Midnight learned desire. I felt it watching me again, not as a guard, not as a prisoner, as a strategist. Unknown sender, conflict optimal, division increases yield. I replied for the first time in years, "You are tearing them apart." The response came instantly. They were already divided. The truth stung. The Still planned a global refusal. No countdown, no toast, no shared moment. Just noise, movement, distraction, anything but agreement. The Gathered planned a response. The largest synchronized toast in history. Same second, same words, same gesture. 2 events, same night. Different answers to the same question. I stood alone as the hour approached, feeling the world tighten. If the Gathered won, the doors would open wider than ever before. If the Still won, midnight would not disappear. It would starve, and starving things become violent. I realized the final horror. There was no winning, only choosing which version of loss we could survive. The hour came. I felt both sides pull. Screens lit up across the planet. Some showed chaos, music, noise. Others showed perfect stillness. The second arrived. Midnight split. Not open. Split. The sound was like glass breaking underwater. People screamed. Lights went out. When the world came back, it was different. No one disappeared, but everyone remembered. They remembered the pressure, the choice, the moment they almost agreed. Midnight had been seen by everyone at once. It recoiled, not defeated, exposed. The invitation stopped. For now, I knew it would return, but it would never again be invisible. And that meant humanity had one fragile advantage: awareness. The war did not end that night, but it changed from shadows into history. After midnight was exposed, the world entered a long quiet, not peace, Caution! People stopped counting out loud. New Year celebrations became fragmented affairs. Music played continuously, so there was no single second to focus on. Fireworks launched at random intervals. Some cities banned countdown clocks entirely. Midnight had become suspicious. I walked through these altered celebrations unseen, listening to how language changed. Do not sync your watch. Toast whenever you want. Never all together. The advice spread faster than fear ever had. And still, midnight lingered. I felt it like a pressure system circling the planet, waiting for conditions to align again. Awareness weakened it, but did not destroy it. Nothing that feeds on attention ever truly dies. The tall figure never appeared again. In its absence, smaller things surfaced, shadows that paused too long in reflections, seconds that repeated when no one was looking, a faint warmth in the chest when too many people shared the same thought. Midnight had learned subtlety. I aged now, slowly, normally. Each year added weight to my bones and distance to my memories. I welcomed it. Aging meant I was no longer anchored to the threshold alone. Others had begun to notice, not just once a year, random moments when groups instinctively avoided synchronization, when crowds cheered at different times without planning it, when silence fell unevenly instead of all at once. Humanity had learned a reflex, but reflexes fade. The first cult appeared 3 years after the split. They called themselves the Witnesses of the Second. They believed midnight was not a threat, but a test, a filter meant to separate those willing to join something greater. They practiced synchronized breathing, synchronized blinking, training their bodies to align without clocks. I watched them from a distance. This was inevitable. Fear fragments. Faith organizes. The invitations returned in new forms. Not messages, not cards. Songs, simple melodies that got stuck in the head. Rhythms that encouraged clapping at the same moment. Viral challenges built around timing. Midnight did not ask anymore. It hummed. I tried to intervene quietly. I disrupted meetings, planted doubts, changed rhythms, but I could not reach everyone, nor should I. Rachel had been right. Teaching mattered more than control. One night I stood at the edge of a city square watching two groups. One gathered in perfect stillness, eyes closed, breath aligned. The other laughed chaotically, music overlapping, movement unplanned. Midnight hovered between them like a held breath. The still group faltered. Someone laughed. The spell broke. Midnight receded. I felt a tired smile cross my face. This was the future, not victory. Practice. Humanity learning again and again to resist the comfort of perfect alignment. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. Unknown sender. Adaptive resistance acknowledged. Cycle lengthening. I typed a reply. Good. The message vanished. I walked home beneath fireworks launched out of sequence. No single moment owned the sky, and for now, that was enough. Midnight would return. It always does, but so would we. Imperfect, out of sync, alive. Years passed in fragments, not because time was broken again, but because memory had learned to protect itself. Humanity adjusted to living with midnight, the way coastal cities adjust to tides. You do not stop the ocean, you study it. You build habits around it. You teach children where not to stand. I became a historian of near disasters. Whenever a synchronized moment almost formed, I felt it, a tightening in the air, a subtle warmth in my chest. Midnight clearing its throat, I would arrive quietly, sometimes as a stranger, sometimes as a friend, sometimes as nothing more than a distraction that arrived at the perfect second. A dropped glass, a sudden song, a laugh that broke the rhythm. Small things saved lives now. The witnesses of the second fractured into factions. Some abandoned synchronization entirely. Others doubled down, believing failure meant impurity. Their meetings grew secretive, smaller, more intense. Midnight fed less, but it fed better. The invitations adapted again. They became private, one-on-one moments when someone stood alone with a drink, a clock, and a feeling they could not explain. Midnight no longer needed crowds. It only needed a yes. That terrified me more than anything before. Refusal had become cultural. Acceptance had become intimate. I followed the patterns across cities and years. Always the same profile. Lonely, reflective. People at turning points in their lives. Graduations, divorces, funerals, moments when midnight already existed inside them. I tried to reach them in time. Sometimes I did. Sometimes I arrived too late. Those disappearances were different. No witnesses, no ripples, just absence folded neatly into the world. I aged faster after each failure, not physically, inside. One winter night, I felt a familiar pull, stronger than it had been in decades. Not widespread, focused, a single point. I followed it to a hospital room. An elderly man lay awake, staring at a digital clock on the wall. A plastic cup of water sat untouched beside him. 11:59 p.m. He looked at me calmly when I entered. "You are not staff," he said. "No," I replied. He smiled faintly. "I thought so." The air thickened. Midnight was already there. Not as pressure, as patience. The man spoke softly. "I do not want to disappear alone." I understood. This was the new form. No celebration, no crowd, just a quiet agreement. I sat beside him. "You do not have to toast," I said. He shook his head. "I am not afraid of dying." "I know," I said. "I am afraid of being chosen," he continued. The clock changed. Midnight arrived. Nothing happened. The man exhaled. "Thank you," he whispered. He passed moments later. Peacefully, midnight receded. I left the hospital shaking. That was the truth I had been avoiding. Midnight no longer only took. Sometimes it asked to be witnessed. Sometimes refusal was not the answer. Sometimes presence was. The rules had changed again, and I was no longer sure I understood them, which meant one thing. The story was not ending. It was learning how to be quiet. I stopped trusting my instincts. That was the most dangerous change of all. For years I had relied on the pull in my chest, the tightening of seconds, the subtle warning that midnight was near. Now those signals blurred. Sometimes they came too late. Sometimes they never came at all. Midnight was learning how to hide from me. It no longer announced itself with pressure or dread. It arrived quietly, wrapped in ordinary moments. A kitchen light left on, a cup resting on a counter, a clock ticking in another room. People began to disappear without pattern. Not at midnight, not at celebrations. Between seconds, the news called it stress-related incidents, sudden departures, unexplained absences. The world had grown comfortable with mystery. That comfort frightened me. I kept records again, notes, times, locations, patterns that refused to connect. Midnight was not breaking rules anymore. It was writing new ones. The invitations changed for the final time. They were not messages. They were thoughts, ideas that slipped into the mind fully formed. What if this moment mattered? What if you marked it? What if you were seen? People mistook them for intuition, for destiny. I tried to intervene, but how do you interrupt a thought someone believes is their own? I found myself watching rather than acting, waiting rather than preventing. I became obsolete. One night I felt midnight without warning. No pull, no pressure, just absence. A space where something should have been. I followed it instinctively to an empty subway platform. A young woman stood at the edge, staring down the tunnel. A watch glowed faintly on her wrist. She smiled when she saw me. "You are late," she said. The words chilled me. Late meant I still mattered. I approached slowly. "What are you waiting for?" She glanced at her watch. "It feels right," she said. This second, a train roared in the distance. Midnight hovered unseen. I realized then the truth. Midnight no longer needed time. It needed meaning. I spoke carefully. "No second is special unless you make it so." She frowned. "That is what they want you to think." The train drew closer. Wind tore through the platform. I saw the faint outline of a door forming in the air beside her. Not a moment, a choice. I stepped between her and the edge. "Look at me," I said. She hesitated. That was enough. The door dissolved. The train passed. She blinked, confused. "Why am I here?" she asked. I did not answer. I watched her leave, shaken. Midnight retreated, but not far. It was no longer hunting crowds. It was hunting conviction. As I stood alone on the platform, I felt something settle into place. This was not a war to win. It was a lesson to repeat forever. Midnight would keep finding people who wanted their moments to mean something, and someone would always need to stand in the way. I walked back into the city older than before, not in body, in purpose. The role I thought I had escaped was waiting for me again, not as a guardian, not as a lock, but as a reminder that not every moment needs to be marked. Some only need to pass. I thought I understood midnight. That was my final mistake. Understanding implies completion, and midnight had never been complete. It was not an entity, not a place, not even a ritual anymore. It was a habit that humanity kept returning to whenever life felt too large to carry alone. I became quieter after the subway platform. I stopped rushing toward every disturbance. I stopped trying to intercept every almost moment. Instead, I watched how people talked about time. They spoke of milestones, anniversaries, deadlines, turning points, moments they wanted to mean something. That desire was midnight's true home. I noticed it in hospitals most of all. Not the dying, the living. Families huddled around around beds waiting for numbers to change on machines. Lovers holding hands waiting for a prognosis. Parents staring at clocks waiting for permission to hope. Midnight lived there comfortably. I intervened when I could. Sometimes I would cough at the wrong second. Sometimes I would ask a meaningless question. Sometimes I would simply stand close enough that a person felt seen without understanding why. Those moments passed. Others did not. The disappearances became softer. No sirens, no headlines, just empty chairs, unanswered messages, a sense that someone had stepped out of the room and forgotten to come back. I aged more rapidly now. Every failure took something from me. Memories dulled, names slipped away. The edges of my past blurred like reflections in rain. I wondered if that was Midnight's goal all along. Not destruction, erosion. One evening I received an invitation again. Not written, spoken. A stranger on the bus leaned toward me and whispered, "You are invited to witness." Then he stood up and got off without another word. I followed the feeling to an old community hall on the edge of the city. Inside, folding chairs were arranged in a loose circle. No decorations, no music, just people, ordinary people. Each held a small cup of water. No clocks, no countdowns. A woman spoke calmly. "We are here to mark a moment," she said. "Not together," she added quickly. "Not the same second, just the same reason." I felt Midnight stir. This was new. People sharing intention without synchronization. I stepped back into the shadows. One by one, they drank. Not at once, not with ceremony, just when it felt right to them. Midnight hovered uncertain. No doors formed, no pressure built. The moment passed. The woman smiled. "We do not need permission to remember," she said. I left shaken. That night, Midnight came to me fully for the first time in years. Not as fear, as exhaustion. It showed me what it had become. A reflection of humanity's need to pause, to acknowledge existence, to say this mattered. "You cannot erase that it said." "No," I replied, "but we can survive it." Midnight receded slowly. I understood then. The end would not come with a final choice. It would come with practice, with people learning how to mark life without surrendering to the moment itself. My role was nearly finished, not because Midnight was gone, but because it was no longer alone. Others had begun to understand, and understanding shared is harder to consume. I walked home beneath a sky with no fireworks, no countdowns, just stars moving at their own pace. For the first time, I did not feel the need to watch the clock. Time passed, and that was enough. I did not expect Midnight to resist quietly. That assumption cost me more than any confrontation ever had. After the community hall, after the night when people learned to mark moments without synchronizing them, I believed Midnight would fade into something harmless, a remnant, a superstition that lost its teeth. I was wrong. Midnight adapted again. It stopped approaching moments of meaning. It approached moments of loss. Grief is already synchronized. Hospitals became quieter places. Funeral homes filled more often. Memorial services grew crowded, not with celebration, but with shared sorrow. Midnight learned to hide inside mourning. I noticed it first at a cemetery, a winter burial. Gray sky, wind cutting through coats, people standing close together for warmth rather than ritual. No clocks, no countdowns, but everyone held their breath at the same time. The casket lowered, the silence deepened, and I felt midnight bloom, not as pressure, as weight. A woman near the front clutched her chest and whispered a name. A man beside her raised his hand without realizing why. Not a glass, a photograph. The moment aligned, someone disappeared. Not violently, not visibly. 1 second they stood there. The next second there was a gap where memory struggled to fill space. No one screamed. Grief swallowed the anomaly whole. I understood the danger immediately. You cannot warn people away from mourning. You cannot disrupt sorrow without becoming monstrous. Midnight had found a sanctuary. I followed the pattern across months. Vigils, anniversaries, public tragedies. Everywhere grief gathered. Midnight pressed close. Disappearances increased, but were never questioned. Loss explained loss. I aged rapidly during that time. Sleep came rarely. When it did, I dreamed of empty chairs at dinner tables that no one remembered removing. I tried to intervene differently, not with noise, with warmth. I stood beside strangers and placed a hand on their shoulder. At the exact wrong second, I asked them to breathe, to sit, to step away. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it did not. One night I stood at a roadside memorial where candles flickered in the wind. A young boy stared at a photograph of his brother. I felt midnight gather. I knelt beside him. "Do you want to tell me about him?" I asked. The boy looked up. Words spilled out. Stories, laughter through tears. The moment fractured. Midnight recoiled. The boy stayed. I realized then the shape of the final answer. Midnight fed on shared silence, on unspoken agreement. Grief synchronized without words, so the counter was not disruption. It was voice, memory spoken aloud. Pain acknowledged individually. The next months were exhausting. I became a listener, a witness, a stranger who asked questions at the wrong times, who encouraged people to speak when silence felt heavy. Disappearances slowed, not stopped, but reduced. Midnight withdrew into corners of the world where silence still ruled. It came to me once more, not angry, resigned. "You are changing what I can reach," it said. I nodded. "You changed first." It faded. I felt something settle inside me. The end was close, not because midnight was gone, but because humanity was learning something older than fear. That silence is not always respect. Sometimes it is surrender, and surrender is how midnight had always entered. As I walked home past a city alive with ordinary noise, I felt hope again, fragile, uncertain, but real, and I knew the last test was coming, not for me, for everyone. The final test did not arrive with spectacle. There were no warnings, no invitations whispered on buses or slipped into thoughts. Midnight did not announce itself because it no longer needed to. Humanity carried it everywhere. The last test arrived as a day, an ordinary day, a global memorial, a year after a catastrophe that no one could fully explain. The world paused together. Governments agreed. Networks aligned. Schools closed. Work stopped. 1 minute of silence. Not a countdown. Not a toast. Just quiet. I felt midnight awaken fully for the first time in years. Not cautious. Not subtle. Complete silence spread across continents like a held breath. Billions of people stood still at once, hearts synchronized, thoughts aligned around loss. This was everything midnight had ever wanted. I stood alone in my apartment, hands shaking. I knew what would happen if nothing changed. Silence without voice was surrender. I turned on every light. I opened the windows. I spoke, not loudly, clearly. If you are listening, I said, do not be quiet. Outside, the silence deepened. I continued, say their names, tell their stories, speak even if your voice shakes. I did not know who could hear me, but I knew what midnight could not survive. Voice. Around the world, something fractured, not the silence. The agreement. A woman sobbed aloud. A man shouted a name. A child asked a question that could not wait. Voices spread unevenly, chaotically, beautifully. The silence broke. Midnight screamed, not in rage, in emptiness. There were no disappearances, no gaps, no missing seconds. The moment passed. Later, analysts called it a failure of coordination. Organizers blamed human error. They were wrong. It was a success. Midnight came to me one last time, not as pressure, not as presence, as absence. You have changed what silence means, it said. I nodded. Silence is for listening, not agreeing. It faded. I felt the weight lift. Years later, people still observe moments of silence, but never together, never exactly the same. Someone always speaks, someone always moves, someone always refuses to disappear. I am old now, very old. But time moves freely. I no longer feel midnight at my chest. I feel voices, laughter, stories told at the wrong second. If you are hearing this story now, remember one thing. Do not toast to nothing. Do not count together. And when the world asks you to be silent at the same time as everyone else, speak. That is how it ends. Not with fear, but with a voice. The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next stories.